Good evening, and thank you for your participation in this forum this evening. I wish that I could have provided this as an overview in person, but in this new virtual environment, we are all learning new ways to deliver information. The Upper Darby School District has attempted to design several options for the reopening of our schools. Unfortunately, the guidance for reopening schools in Pennsylvania has been limited up until this point, providing several different options and opinions on social distancing, appropriate personal protective equipment, and whether or not virtual instructional days will actually count toward the state-mandated 900 to 990 hours and the required 180 days of instruction. The county recently formed the Reopening of School Task Force that consists of several Delaware County superintendents, the executive director of the Delaware County Intermediate Unit, and medical experts from the University of Pennsylvania and the Chester County Department of Health. As a member of this work group, we will be holding our second meeting on Monday, June 29th. I will provide more information following the countywide discussion regarding the reopening of schools. Prior to the formation of this work group, Pennsylvania school districts have been working on developing flexible instructional models in an attempt to figure out how to best meet the Pennsylvania Department of Education's, known as PDE, guidance, as well as recommendations from the CDC. As you can imagine, it is not an easy task to develop a plan with so many moving parts and ever-changing medical guidance. The information we are providing this evening and the plans and options for the reopening of our schools are imperfect, and we recognize that some of the options create obstacles for you and your family. I'd like to say that again. The information we are providing this evening and the plans and options for the reopening of our schools are imperfect, and we recognize that some of the options create obstacles for you and your family. We will do our best to make adjustments within reason to support you and your family through all of this. We recognize that our students are best served in our schools, by our staff, and provided with an opportunity to socialize with peers. We must, however, do this the safest way we can. Regardless of the option the Board of School Directors approves, we will do our best to provide a meaningful and engaging educational experience. Our options for implementing social distancing and attempting to meet Pennsylvania Department of Education and CDC guidelines required us to shift boundary lines for some communities at the elementary and middle school level because of a lack of space and a lack of personnel for some of our schools. We have designed options that provide for flexible instruction with social distancing to the maximum extent possible. We're also considering options for a return to full in-person instruction, asking parents and families to promote proper hygiene, hand washing, and keeping students home from school when sick. Essentially, we will need your help as a community no matter what option we pick. A final option is virtual instruction for students if a school or district is required to close. We are attempting to use grant funding to increase our student Chromebook devices to provide each student, kindergarten through 12th grade, with a device for the 2020-2021 school year. If we are to move to virtual instruction only, the academic program we provide would be substantially different than the academic program we provided during the mandated closure. This evening, our focus groups will provide a brief overview of the options for the session you are attending. Please note that each session will be recorded and provided on our district website. The facilitators for each session will bring back common themes for the Board of School Directors to consider before approving a final plan on July 14th. Thank you for your willingness to participate in this informational session this evening. And as a final reminder, I hope you know that we are doing our best to navigate all of this information and make the best decisions that we can. Not one plan is perfect at this time, but we are going to continue to work with you, our community members, and our students to provide the best educational experience that we can. Thank you for listening, and thank you for engaging with us this evening. This has been the Superintendent of Schools, Dan McGarry.
I would like to review the agenda for this evening. We're going to go over expectations for public participation, an overview of assumptions, an overview of the flexible schedule options, an overview of common themes. We will then entertain some questions and considerations with the time that we have remaining. We will offer some concluding remarks, and there will be a brief survey that will be sent to you at the end of this presentation. We want to remind everyone at this time of our policy for public participation at meetings. In accordance with Policy 903, the Board, and by extension, District Administration, recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of involving members of the public in meetings. District Administration also recognizes its responsibility to conduct its business in an orderly and efficient manner that permits the opportunity for orderly expression of public comment. To that end, we have provided prior to this forum an email address by which the public was able to submit comments and questions for consideration this evening. Answers to these questions will also be provided through a frequently asked questions FAQ document. A video recording of this session will be available for your review as well. We will be emailing the video and FAQ to families and posting these to our website, to YouTube with the closed captioning feature, and across our social media following in the days following tonight's forum. In order to permit further comment during tonight's forum, participants will be able to use the Zoom chat feature to ask a question. The facilitator will attempt to address these questions throughout the presentation. It is important that you adhere to the following guidelines and rules of decorum when using the chat feature. 1. Post your first and last name each time you enter a comment or question. 2. Please frame your comment or question clearly and as briefly as possible. 3. Refrain from entering irrelevant or personally directed comments. And 4. Do not use abusive or obscene language. All of such comments will be deleted and the commenter will be excluded from the meeting. We thank you in advance for your cooperation and adherence to these guidelines. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge one of my assistant principals, Mr. James Finch, who will serve as my co-host this evening and monitor the mute feature of this presentation, as well as our Director of Communications, Ms. Aranda Buford, and our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Daniel McGarry, who are also participants this evening. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the hard work and dedication of these individuals and all the Upper Darby staff and administration that worked collectively to develop the proposal you will see this evening. This was such a team effort, and I am so proud of what we have accomplished. I would also like to publicly thank our School Board of Directors for their continued support and guidance. I would like to begin by reviewing some assumptions as it pertains to the proposed flexible high school schedule. The student body will be separated into 3 cohorts that will cycle in AM and PM sessions through Upper Darby High School for face-to-face class time. Students in special programs such as life skills and supplemental autistic support will maintain their current scheduling format and not be in a cohort. During face-to-face sessions, each classroom will have only the students to ensure that CDC guidelines on social distancing are maintained. The average can range from 9 to 14 students depending on the size of the classroom. 41-minute transition time between cohorts in the middle of the day. Breakfast and lunch will be available as grab and go, and lunch will not be scheduled in the student day. There are no full and half day and service days. All professional development will take place during the PM session of the weekly distance learning day. Time during the school week when students are not physically in school will be distance learning time. Students are able to register for 8 courses a school year that meet in person, which is 4 per semester. The 2 different schedule rotation options for varying levels of distance learning days will be presented this evening. Depending on the final rotation, face-to-face time will be approximately 30%. Three cohorts of students were created to maintain capacity compliance according to the CDC regulations. There were two guiding factors when developing the cohorts. One was maintaining the strength and community of diversity, and the second was keeping the focus of the number of courses we run from year to year and semester to semester. Both flexible options include the delivery of courses in the current master schedule. On the right-hand side of the slide is a breakdown of our current district by location. On the left-hand side of the slide is the layout of the cohorts on top of the current locations, designating the area where students would come from for each cohort. This has been reviewed by our transportation department and our district manager of data and operations. The teacher will be responsible for a class size of 25 to 30 students. However, the cohorts will allow for only 9 to 14 students to be face-to-face for a course at one time. The class size depends on the square footage of the individual classrooms and may vary. The cohort design allows us to provide a flexible schedule for the upcoming school year that would include virtual instruction as the main platform for learning. However, in addition to virtual learning, face-to-face sessions have been infused on a rotating basis. During the face-to-face sessions, teachers will provide differentiation and individualized instruction and assessment opportunities. Students will be able to ask questions based on the information provided in the virtual setting. There will be an all-day virtual opportunity during the rotation. At that time, students will complete their work online while teachers provide office hours and participate in professional development opportunities. The bell schedule will be as follows. The regular start and end time of 7:30 a.m. and 2:41 p.m. will not change. There will be an a.m. and p.m. session each day. There will be 2 different cohorts in the building each day. There is a 41-minute transition time built in between the a.m. cohort and the p.m. cohort to allow students to appropriately exit and enter the building, maintaining social distancing guidelines. The instructor will teach the same courses during the AM and PM session, but to different cohorts of students. During this time, staff will wipe down and sanitize the instructional space in between cohorts, and deep cleaning will occur every night. As you can see, there's extra time built into the first period of the AM and PM sessions to allow for homeroom type information to be shared and food distribution. In option 1, there is an A, B, and C day rotation with a full distance learning day on Wednesday every other week. For example, if you are in cohort 1 on A day, you would come in the AM session and then continue distance learning at home for the remainder of A day. On B day, you would participate in distance learning in the AM and come to the building for a PM session. And on C day, you would not report to the high school at all, and C day would be an all-day distance learning day for your cohort. This would be the same for each cohort, 1 day in the AM, 1 day in the PM, and 1 day distance learning, and the rotation would repeat throughout the course of the semester, having every other Wednesday as a full distance learning day for all cohorts. As stated before, that would be a day for staff to provide office hours for students, planning and preparation, and professional development opportunities. Option 2 is similar to option 1, the only difference being that there is fewer face-to-face class minutes per week. This option allows for a weekly full distance learning day to provide office hours for students and planning and professional development for teachers. Again, the same concept if you look at the 3 cohorts. Each cohort would operate on an AM, PM, and distance learning rotation every 3 days with full distance learning days every Wednesday. If we do not go with the flexible schedule and have to continue with our full distance learning instruction in the fall, the proposed bell schedule would be the same and teachers would provide a balance of synchronous and asynchronous instruction, and students would not have face-to-face rotation in the building. This would be different than the virtual learning plan from this past semester. Providing synchronous instruction was not mandatory, but would be in the full virtual learning model in the future. We received questions about what it would look like for our vocational technical education students. Here is an example of a VOTEC student in Cohort 1. On A Day, the student would attend their VOTEC program in the AM, while the student's peers attended the face-to-face session at the high school. On B Day, the VOTEC students would attend their vocational program in the AM, while their peers in Cohort 1 were distance learning, and would attend the face-to-face learning at the high school in the PM session with their peers from Cohort 1. And on C Day, the student would attend VOTEC in the AM, while their peers were distance learning and participate in distance learning in the PM. So essentially, the student will participate in the vocational technical program daily and access only one less face-to-face session at the high school. This would be the same pattern for VOTEC students participating in the PM program, but the schedule would be different. During the weeks of instruction that are impacted by holidays or professional development days, to ensure face-to-face instruction time is maximized, the cohorts scheduled for the affected day during the week will have their brick and mortar learning day moved to Wednesday. The effective weeks are listed and are the weeks of August 31st, September 7th, November 2nd, November 23rd, December 21st, January 18th, February 15th, and May 31st. We've received several comments and suggestions, and I would like to address the following. Leveling. As you are aware, we are not removing leveling from the proposed schedule. The proposed schedule will include leveled courses as outlined in our course selection guide. Health mandates and cleaning. We will have daily thermometer checks on buses and before entering the building. There will be multiple entry points, and our nurses will be at each entry point. If a student presents with a heightened condition, we have a plan to address the medical concern. Masks will be mandatory for bus travel and strongly encouraged for students in the building. It will be easier to enforce in a flexible schedule option compared to returning to the high school at full capacity. We are close to meeting the 6-foot recommended distancing at the secondary level, and we will look to provide no less than 5 feet distancing. Wednesday as a full distance learning day. The full day distance learning option provides an opportunity for students to meet with staff on a consulting basis for additional support. It provides time for planning and preparation that will benefit and support the new distance learning model and professional development time for staff to assist with ongoing best practices and optimal learning opportunities for our students. Cohorts. The cohorts have been reviewed and approved by Transportation Department as well as Central Administration. The cohorts are designed to balance the number of students from district neighborhoods. The cohorts must be followed to ensure the schedule meets regulation and CDC guidelines while providing optimal learning opportunities. July 14th board approval. We cannot continue to change the plan. We must decide what is best for our community and begin to develop the schedule and the plans and procedures that are required to carry out the proposed plan. If we do not establish the plan, we will not be ready to open schools. Teachers need time to know what their schedule and course preparation entail to adequately prepare for the start of the school year. We cannot provide a model that allows for virtual only and flexible schedule. The proposed model requires staff to be in the building to service the rotating cohorts and provide an equitable amount of face-to-face time for all students. Synchronous and asynchronous learning. There will be time for synchronous learning during the teacher's consultation office hours. All staff will have a prep and a lunch period built into their school day. We will have athletics and clubs running after school as long as we maintain social distancing and adhere to CDC guidelines. We recently posted our health plan and procedures for voluntary athletic and band workouts to begin July 1st through August 9th, at which time we will follow the revised PIAA regulations for in-season participation. At this time is at approximately 7 p.m., and we have about 30 minutes for questions and consideration and closing remarks before our session ends at 7:30. I would like to defer to other team members, and if there's any questions or considerations that were posted in this chat that were not reviewed or discussed in the presentation, please feel free to share.
Good evening, everyone. It's Dr. McGarry. I hope you can hear me. We're in my office here, and the internet is not working so hot. I'm sure as all of you can relate. So I want to answer some of the questions that have come up fast and furious here that I can probably help. Special education, some of the questions. We will be the students that are in autistic support and life skills support. We be planning for them to come in for full day instruction Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So students that are in life skills, autistic support, our multi-handicapped students would be coming in for full day instruction Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. As far as music is concerned and instrument is concerned, I hope you can still hear me. And all of those are important factors, but CDC guidelines right now and recommendations are such that students singing together in large groups, because of the 3 to 6 foot, basically, spit it sounds unprofessional, I apologize, but spit coming out of your mouth is the real concern, not only getting in the eyes or the mouths of others, but also into the teachers that are there. So we're still trying to wait and see how we would handle our chorus with large groups getting together. We are working on attempting, as we go to green, as we are in green, to allow our band to begin to practice and considering summer camp as sports open. And we have to be very cautious on how our student athletes and our musicians perform, cleaning instruments and hygiene. I can't emphasize enough that all of this is going to be about practicing good hygiene at home and in school. At this time, we are just trying to provide as many options as possible to our community, and ultimately our school board is going to have to approve one of those options. Let me see if I can get to some of the other questions that are on here. Yes, as far as health concerns are concerned with our staff and our students, we are going to take that into consideration. But I want to be clear on this call, in particular at the high school, we're trying to run every course, electives and regular courses. And in doing so, there becomes what is called a tipping point. If we don't have the appropriate number of students for the particular class that want to have virtual learning, we wouldn't be able to provide a teacher to teach it synchronously, meaning live instruction from a teacher. We will be able to provide virtual learning, but it comes down to staff availability, whether it's a in-person, a virtual teacher actually instructing in a certain point in time versus what is called asynchronous, where there be a teacher coaching, but the student would be doing the work on their own. That comes down to a number situation. How many students want to be virtual versus how many students want to come in person? And there's only so much staff to do that. We're blessed. Our teachers have been unbelievable in what they've done here in the school district, as have the administrators working with everybody. I don't know that it's been like that everywhere, but our Upper Darby School District teachers have been great. But they're only one of them in each classroom. You can't cut them in half. And they have a work day. So we have to balance that. If we are virtual only, if we were to reverse out of green and into a red phase or a yellow phase and we had to go into a virtual only, our expectation that the instruction would be far different than it was during the pandemic, and we would have more synchronous, more expectation that teachers would be teaching students in person, but we would still have to have an opportunity for our teachers to take a break and lesson plan throughout that week if we were to go virtually. Let me see if I can catch up with some of the other questions that are on here. I apologize. As far as the check is concerned, as far as temperature checks are concerned, the reality of temperature checks, there's more research coming out that temperature checks are really more false positive than not. I will tell you that we put a plan together. We were going out to purchase 120 to 160 thermometers. If we were to open in this flexible schedule, we were going to, if the board approves it, still take temperatures of students when they got on the bus and have a setup when students, walkers, or parents dropped off students to have a temperature check when they entered the building. That was going to require, it would require us to have, if the board approves it, almost $300,000 in additional hourly nurses. Thankfully, we do have CARES dollars, funding that would support that cause. But we've got to be careful that once we approve these plans, we are spending that money to initiate those. I could tell you that I don't know that every single school district will be checking temperatures regardless of what plan they put in place, because the latest information that came out just as much as yesterday from the Pennsylvania Department of Education, there are a lot of false positives and people are asymptomatic and not showing a temperature. However, we do have a plan to take temperatures if we were to come back in a flexible schedule. If we come back all at one time, all together, we do not have the resources to take temperatures every single day with, let's say, 3,800 students showing up at the high school at one time. I see Mrs. Namavang is asking me if we're leaning towards more in-person pre-COVID. I will tell you that I am not. As the superintendent of the school district, I believe that this was real. I believe our community has been impacted by that. I also believe our community has gone through a lot with the social injustice that we're facing on a national level. Our kids are facing that. And I think we've got to be wise to how we return to school and don't act like people have lost their lives. People have lost their lives as we went on this break and throughout this summer. And there's a lot of things that we have to address. I am not leaning toward wanting to open in person. However, many school districts are, and our school board will have to take that into consideration. At this point in time, I believe that we would be best served to go with a rotational schedule with the AM and PM for a lot of reasons, much more so the health and the safety of our students. But I could be wrong, and I respect that. And if our school board decides to go back in person, we'll support that, and I respect that as well. But really, you're the community, and you have a say in this. At the conclusion of this meeting tonight, we are going to do a survey and ask for you to give feedback on that. Jim, if we go back completely in person, Jim and the cafeteria are two spaces that will still be a problem, because even if we went back fully, the cafeteria is an area where students sitting face to face with each other with a mask off, eating and talking could be a concern. That's why it's also a risk for us to go back completely in person and have everybody back in the cafeteria or spaces like gym. If we do the hybrid model, we would have smaller classes. That way at the high school, we wouldn't have so many people in one place at one time, whether it be transitioning through the hallways or in certain classes. And that's why we're looking at that. Again, face coverings. If students ride a bus, we're going to try to social distance as much as possible, but transportation will be difficult. The best we can say would be 2 students on a seat on a bus, or we wouldn't be able to transport students to school. And we would require students to wear a mask on the bus. As far as requiring students to wear a mask in class at all times, we will not. We will encourage it. We will have masks and PPE for our teachers to protect our teachers with either a face shield or a mask. And we will have some masks available for students who need them or who would like to wear one. We will strongly encourage the wearing of masks, especially at the change of classes, however. As far as how classes will work that are not online friendly, such as physical education and science labs, we spent a considerable amount of time. That's why we closed the school early this year, and I appreciate that, refining our lesson plans and refining what we're doing. Our intention, although imperfect, and I want to keep saying that, our teachers are doing a great job. It's not perfect. We are going to try to obviously increase the type of instruction we give in physical education and in the science labs, virtually and obviously in person. We will try to provide orientation over the summer. So if we're coming back completely in person, we'll have an orientation. And if this schedule gets approved, one of these schedules gets approved, we would do a virtual orientation. James asked, will students get Zoom teaching sessions with a teacher during virtual learning days? What we will be doing is on the Wednesday, when the teachers will have office hours in the morning, there'll be about 2 hours between 1.5 to 2 hours of teacher time to make office hours for students and also conference with parents. Teachers will have time to lesson plan on Wednesdays and to have time for professional development to improve their lessons. But yes, there will be time for teachers to check in with staff as they're doing their own virtual days on the Wednesday. It'll be very difficult. I keep saying this. We know that it'll be difficult to enforce masks. All we can do is ask you to work with us to take into consideration that we do have staff that have health concerns, and that more than anything, what we're finding in the latest research is that our adults are at a higher risk. And our students that are immunocompromised are also at a high risk. So we're not looking to turn this into another reason for administrators and teachers to have to talk to students in a way that creates controversy, but we would like people to be respectful and try to wear masks as much as possible. Obviously, when they're in class and they're responding to questions, we would not expect that, but we do want to try to enforce this as much as possible. Teachers, to Mrs. Patterson's question, teachers will not be able to do live virtual instruction unless we have enough students that free up teachers to provide live synchronous instruction. So in the schedule that you heard, the flexible instruction, on the days when the students are not in person with a teacher, they will be doing what is called asynchronous learning on their own, keeping up with the resources and materials, and then being coached when they're back in person. If we were to go virtual only, those sessions would be called synchronous, where the teacher would log in with the students and provide instruction to the students in a synchronous model. If the board approves an in-person model, and there are students and parents who opt to go in a virtual model, we would have to see how many students opt for that model and what teacher availability would be there to provide synchronous instruction, meaning teacher instruction directly. Because it becomes a number game with the type of classes that we're able to run. And that's why this becomes very complicated. If a child fails to temperature check, will they need a negative COVID test to get back into school? We have a health plan that's also going to be, it's also posted right now on the website. We would obviously ask to wait for 24 hours to 78 hours based on the temperature of the child. If the child fails a temperature check, we all know that that does not necessarily mean it's COVID. We would ask that if a child fails a temperature check and that temperature does not go down, that we would encourage that family to please have that student checked, or do not return that student to school until that temperature breaks. There's a lot of guidance that's coming out now as well, that schools may not shut down at all again as a result of this, because people felt that schools shouldn't have closed in the first place. So as far as quarantining students, as far as quarantining staff, as far as schools are shutting down, we have an entirely separate presentation, and you can see that on the website as far as what our plan would be for that. We are also working with the Chester County Department of Health, because as you know, Delaware County does not have its own health department. They will provide us guidance on when to quarantine and when to do things like that if a student should test positive, or if we have any concern involving a student or a staff member. So I'm up to Mrs. McCall. How often do you think that children will be doing the lesson on their own as opposed to having a virtual class? That's in the presentation. Mrs. Simone has presented that. It basically comes down to about 28% of the time would be in person, or up to 40-some%, depending on the model that the school district presents. Do we anticipate using substitutes to supplant the staff with virtual and in-person instruction? So I'm not sure I understand that question, but we will still have to rely on substitute teachers. Absolutely. As far as supplementing staff, if we have to hire new staff to run the virtual instruction program, that is something the board would have to adopt. Obviously, there's budget constraints, and we cannot go out there and just simply hire additional staff given the financial ramifications on the school district. But if a teacher is sick, we would bring in a substitute teacher to run the program. This question is going to be one that we talk administratively all the time. We will not chase students down the hallway and get into a disciplinary situation over students wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. And I want to be clear on this phone call. That becomes very problematic. And that's part of the reason why we do feel, on some level, fewer students in at one time will probably promote more social distancing and safer opportunities for students and teachers. Again, I can't emphasize enough, we're hearing the most important factor are the adults. What goes home to a parent who's an adult, students who are immunocompromised, as well as the adults in our building who may be immunocompromised. So we've got to protect adults. We will strongly encourage masks, but enforcing masks should not lead to suspensions and discipline from school, because that becomes counterproductive, because then we're keeping students out of learning. We're going to hope that we're going to work with you as family and you as students to work with us and be realistic about, people's health and safety. There will not be a nurse on buses. We are going to be training our transportation department with these thermometers to take the temperature. We will not be sent, if a student in the elementary level has a high temperature and there's not a parent at the bus stop, we would hope that parents will be at the bus stop. We're going to have a special seat on the bus, meaning a special seat that would socially distance from everybody else, get that student to the school in the nurse's office, and then ask a parent to come and pick up that child. High school students who fail the temperature check in this model, we would not drive them to school. So kindergarten through 8th grade, we would still bring the student to school, but then call the parents to come and pick them up. When a student, if any student becomes sick and falls behind, if it falls behind on their instruction, we already have a policy on illness, and we're going to have to revisit our policy as it is now. So students that are sick, obviously we would provide them an opportunity to make up any of their missed schoolwork. We are going to have to relax our attendance policy under these conditions. We know that if we're asking parents to keep their children home when they're sick, regardless of just COVID-19, then we can't punish parents and students either, because they're doing what's best to keep everybody safe, and we'll allow them to make up that schoolwork. Nicole Ragoso is asking, would it be helpful to have an A day then a B day? I know Mrs. Simone can answer this, but the reality is that it becomes difficult for transportation and for flexing kids in and out to make all the courses happen. The high school schedule is so complicated that we're trying to run every single course based on all the requests that students had. We're not trying to punish any student in the high school for the number of courses that we're running. And then we need the 3 cohorts of students to make sure that we can properly social distance. Again, all of this goes away if we bring students back for in-person learning in the fall. None of the cohorts come into play. We wouldn't be able to implement nearly the amount of social distancing we're talking about right now. We would really be going back to a normal school setting, taking into consideration how we would handle things like the cafeteria and music, believe it or not, singing in the classrooms, but we would be back in person. Mrs. Namavang, I know we've gone back and forth. I do want to say that my email did not say that we would be going back in person. What I did say was that most recent guidance is leaning toward schools returning more in person with relaxed social distancing. I, however, am not necessarily in favor of that approach. I respect everybody's opinion, however, and the community obviously has a say, as does our board of school directors. I'm simply giving you, as the superintendent, my opinion. My opinion is not the end-all be-all. The board will have final say based on the public's concern. I want to be clear. There is guidance and more individuals leaning toward opening normally. Why? Because there are now some doctors, not all, some doctors, obviously the Bucks County Department of Health has released a statement that we need to normalize this. That's the terminology they're using. This is going to be here, and we need to learn how to live with it. And that's what people are saying. We will have deep cleaning every single night. So each day the schools and the buses will be cleaned. We will also be asking for desks to be wiped down in between sessions, and we'll be enforcing proper hygiene as much as possible. So I've got to be aware of time, about 5 more minutes. We still have a cyber school that's virtual. I also want to be clear with everybody. Right now, Governor Wolf has lost his ability to be able to shut down schools. There's actually been legislation to prevent him from closing schools. He's also lost the ability to relax the 180-day school requirement, and also he's lost the ability to relax the 900 required hours and the 990 student hours. What does that mean? That means virtual learning beyond 5 days technically won't count as instructional time because of the political nature of what's going on in Harrisburg. Until that gets decided, some school districts may be, like us, forced to go back in person only, because right now under the school code, only 5 days count for flexible instructional days. So that's another wrinkle in all of this, that there seems to be some political push as well to go back to school. Governor Wolf, I want to repeat, has lost the ability to shut down school or relax the 180-day, 900 and 990 hours. There's talk that Secretary Rivera may have the ability to do that, but at this point in time, we are asking for a legal interpretation on what would happen if that does not get relaxed. Let me see what other questions I can get to. By the way, we'll be saving these questions and we'll be providing out as much as we can. And I understand that it keeps coming up with the required masks. Please, I understand, but what we're being told by these healthcare professionals that are Department of Health people, that the masks for students are not as important as the masks on adults, and that requiring students to wear a mask all day is not in the best interest of the students. That's that's the guidance, that we can encourage it, but making students wear masks, especially at a certain age, may not be in their best interests. But requiring at least a face shield or mask for teachers is important. So let me have Mrs. Simone wrap up the last 5 minutes, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Dr. McGarry. And thank you for taking the time to participate in our Pandemic Reopening of Schools Forum. We have appreciated your engagement and active participation throughout the school closure and remote learning over the past 4 months. We also appreciate your willingness to engage with us in this very complicated discussion and your commitment to work with us to try to find the best solution for your children and families as we navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. As you know, this situation is very fluid and changes can happen at any time. The district is hopeful that with having all 4 options explored with our community, we will be in a better position to adjust to any guidance we might receive from the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the CDC. As we stated, there will be a survey sent to you to your email, the email you provided when registering for the forum. Please complete and submit it. As a reminder, please feel free to email any questions about the pandemic reopening of schools plan to committeequestions@upperdarbysd.org. You can also visit our website at www.upperdarbysd.org for information about the plans. Again, thank you and have a good evening.